Hey guys, how are ya? Welcome back to my channel. It's me, Steven. If you recognize the background behind me, you know that I was once again craving Swedish meatballs. So I jumped in the car. It's so nice. Shimi is so nice to have. I've had it for 2 years now, a little over 2 years, and it's such a luxury, to have a car. So I was sitting here having some Swedish meatballs, and I thought, you know what? I've got my notes for a question and answer video that I wanted to do. And I figured, why don't I just do it here? I'm sitting here by myself doing nothing. So let's have a little chat. I've asked for some questions, and I also had some comments in the comment section that included some questions. So I wrote them all down. I figured let's sit and have a little talk. Some of these questions are going to be from what's a penalty lap? I mention that once in a while. Do I have a favorite child? Yes and no. What do I use to heat up my food? What's the best time to thank a flight attendant? So the questions are kind of all over the place. I didn't organize them in any one particular way. I apologize, but that's pretty in keeping with my channel. So let's get to answering some questions because I can talk forever, as you all know. So one of the first questions, what's a penalty lap? I mentioned penalty laps once in a while, but yesterday was a perfect example of what a penalty lap is. Sometimes we call it a victory lap if you want to be sarcastic. So we have a very long flight from Boston to Las Vegas, for example, and you're emotionally, physically exhausted, but you have to fly to Salt Lake City and back to Las Vegas. That's called a penalty lap. It just feels like a penalty. Or if you want to be sarcastic, again, it's called a victory lap. So if you have a long flight and then you have to do a turn after that, that's what we call a penalty lap. If there's a sick bag in the seat, because people get sick on airplanes all the time, why do people just turn and get sick on the floor? Well, sometimes it's a surprise to that person that they're going to get that sick. I'll tell you, it's not always like, sometimes I know when I'm going to get sick. I kind of know it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I know it's going to happen. They might just not be able to grab that sick bag out of a little teeny little pocket we had there and pull it out in time. And it just happens. Who knows? That little paper bag isn't much of a target. So when I know someone's going to get sick, I give them a plastic trash bag. I tie the corners, I tie the ends into little knots just to help stop any leaks. I know, not very fun. But not everybody knows what's going to happen to their body when they're in the air, and it's sometimes as much a surprise to them as it is to us. All right, do I have a favorite child? Buddy or Eleanor? It's very easy to say that Buddy is my favorite cat. Sometimes he is. He was my first child. He was my first baby. Claire was sometimes my favorite cat because she was the most lovable. She was the sweetest. She was the one that seemed to love attention and love and grooming more than the other cats. Eleanor is more spontaneous. She's like a little elf or a sprite or a gremlin, really. But she's very choosy, and she decides when she wants love or when she wants to be left alone. Her favorite places to be loved is when I'm sitting on the toilet. That's our place. I can't quite film that easily and still be polite, so I don't usually film it. That's our together place. Buddy likes attention everywhere else too. So it's easy to see that I love Buddy more than I love Eleanor, for example. But that's not always the case. If you have more than one child, there are probably times you love one more than the other. And vice versa. Buddy does ask and demand more attention than Eleanor does. Eleanor is very quiet. She's very subtle. Buddy is very demanding. And frequently that ends up being on camera more often. So it's easy to say I have a favorite. I don't, but sometimes I do. Does that make any sense? All right, so do I have an opinion about the recent Delta flight that was on the tarmac for 4 hours without air conditioning? Well, I kind of heard about that, but I also kind of dismissed that as well. When you hear these stories about, for example, any airline, things happen on any airline. But when you hear about something like an airplane on the tarmac for 4 hours with no air conditioning and people getting sick and stuff, I don't know what to believe in terms of that story. I'll tell you a real fact, and I know this is not just from my airline, but if you have passengers on the plane with the door closed and you're out on the tarmac at 3 hours, that plane has to be at the gate with the door open or wheels up and in the air. You can't, in the United States, and this happened apparently in Las Vegas, in the United States, you're not allowed to have an aircraft on the tarmac, especially in this heat, for more than 3 hours. Now, 3 hours is a very, very long time. So at an hour and a half, for example, in my airline, if we're on the tarmac, the door is closed for an hour and a half, I have to start doing what we call a tarmac procedure. Tarmac something, yeah. I have to be able to hand out something to eat, which usually means 2 little Biscoff cookies and a cup of water. I know it's not a lot, but it's enough to kind of give someone some, something to work on while we're waiting to leave. But at 3 hours, that door has to be open and passengers have to be able to get off the aircraft. Now, I don't know what happened with that aircraft. I don't know what happened, how long it took, blah, blah, blah. But we have something called CRM in the industry, crew management system. So that usually means communication. Now, if I am on an aircraft in that sort of situation, we're going to be on the tarmac and there's no air conditioning for 3 hours, I'm going to be talking to my captain, my pilot, and we're going to get that plane back to the airport. It's going to happen because people are getting sick and stuff like that. So I really don't know what happened. I can't believe what 4 hours, even if it were 3 hours, if you don't have air for 3 hours on an aircraft baking in the 113 degree sun, I really honestly, again, can't believe that really happened. And if it did, there had to be a very, very good reason. And then that I can't have an opinion on. So, sorry. I noticed people refusing to follow rules after the challenge with masks during COVID. Are people better behaved after COVID? I kind of think so. And that's going to happen for a little while until people forget what we all went through. So personally, I really, even during COVID, didn't have much of a difficulty. There were always the occasional people who, were a challenge. But when I approach someone to do something like put their bag under the seat in front of them, raise their tray table, put their laptop away, usually I try to be as pleasant about it in a way, or make a little joke, or say something in a way that they just do it rather than fight me or roll their eyes at me. And if they roll their eyes at me, they roll their eyes at me. I don't care. It's not my job. As long as I ask them to do it, there you go. But are people better behaved after COVID in terms of following the rules? I think a little bit. I think we've all gotten used to doing what people ask us to do on an airplane. That's going to eventually go away. I hate to say it's after tragedy, like after 9/11, we all thought the world was going to be different. We're all going to treat each other better. We're all going to be on each other's team, and that didn't last very long. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. But I don't usually have that much of a difficulty with people not doing what they're supposed to do on an aircraft. And for the most part, there are times that it matters. For the most part, if a passenger is not going to put their tray table up for takeoff, and I've asked them 4 times, am I going to tell the captain to not take off? Probably not. Is this an opportunity for that tray table to break someone's ribs if we have to stop quickly? Possibly. There. But am I going to, are we not going to take off because that laptop isn't put away? I might talk to the captain about it, but is he going to delay a takeoff? Probably not. I'm just guessing. That's just my personal opinion. But I think people are better behaved, but that will end. That will go away. People forget tragedy. Does crew pay know when we take off, land, and pay us accurately? I had to kind of cobble that question together from a comment. Yes, they know when we take off, when we land. Every bit of information from takeoff, landings, delays, all that stuff is recorded, and that goes to crew pay. If there are any challenges or difficulties with those numbers, you can look at your pay report and see what was listed and compare that to your own information. So, yeah, they usually know when we take off, when the door closes and all that stuff. But I usually try to keep an eye on that information as well, just in case. Do I budget? No, 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 no. I don't budget. I probably should. I've never developed that skill. What I do is kind of like I do with my weight. I try to be aware of the changes. So if I see my bank account and I know what I'm being paid next month, and it's not a lot, and I haven't had a lot of sales on eBay, and I'm not really making a lot of money on my YouTube channel, I spend less. I am much more choosy on what I tend to spend on. If I'm a little more flush, if I've had good paychecks for 2 or 3 months and my paycheck is doing well and I don't have a lot in my credit card, sometimes I'm a little more spendy, but I usually just keep an eye on it like I keep an eye on my belt. Not very mature of me, but that's just how it is. I'll change my behaviors when I suffer enough. Can't the HOA address my neighbors? If you watched my last video, my neighbors are horrific, but I don't think anything that, and it's horrific only because it's constant. It's like being poke, or being waterboarded. I didn't know what waterboarding was until I read an article on it. It's like when a drop of water is hitting a tortured prisoner's forehead over and over and over. It's like you can't sleep. It's tap, tap, tap. So, I don't know anything my neighbors do is something that would be enough to have the HOA, like, charge them fees or penalties or whatever. I don't know, but my neighbors around me and some of the folks at the HOA are aware of how unpleasant my neighbors are and how consistently unpleasant they are. Do they break enough rules to have them penalized for them? I don't know. I'm not really that in touch with our HOA personally. I thought I would be when I first bought my place, but I found myself very disinterested in being a part of my HOA. As long as they don't increase my HOA again, I'll be fine. And my neighbors, I do my best to ignore them, but now that I know that other people around me hate them just as much, well, it's nice to have someone to talk about them with. Let's see. If I'm married, I'm not, obviously, but if I'm married or you are a flight attendant and you're married to a spouse that has children, so you have stepchildren, can you put them on your flight benefits? Yes, they're your children. Now, if you're going to introduce your children to a friend at a party, you're not going to say, oh, this is my stepson, are you? No, you're going to be, especially if they're in front of you, oh, this is my son. So the airline's going to be the same way as anybody you'd introduce them to. So if your spouse that you marry has children, they are your children, right? So just add them to your benefits. I can't imagine an airline saying, oh, no. They weren't your biological children. Adopted children are your children too, right? So there you go. If you are newly married to someone who has kids, congratulations, and God bless. But yeah, put them on your flight benefits. Caveat. My airline, for example, I think it's 23 or 26. I forget the age, but the minute they hit that magic age of whatever it is, and check your own airline, those kids are removed from your flight benefits. The only people who have permanence on your flight benefits will be your parents and your spouse. Children eventually age out, and with my airline, it's either 23 or 26. I forget which one. Let's see. Are reserves called based on seniority? I don't know anymore. I think so. I think they are now with our new contract, or at least you have the ability to say, call me first before you call other people. I know that exists. So if you're on reserve and you with my airline and you really want to fly, you can let crew scheduling know that you want to be called first before other people. It used to be a very confusing thing with my airline. It used to be very confusing. You would be able to look at the people who are on reserve, who are on call for that day, for example, and it would be determined on how many hours crew scheduling had used them during the month, not including the hours they picked up on their own on their days off, but you really never know what hours that is. And then I think seniority is based in there as well. And then how many days you had available on reserve. It was terribly complicated. But these days I think it's more simple, but seniority does have a place in it, but I don't know exactly. Sorry. This is a big one. Would I consider bidding reserve during slower months? For example, September and October tend to be very slow months with my airline. So I could, in theory, in a very different parallel universe, bid reserve on the chance that crew scheduling doesn't use me or call me. I would know, because I'm a line holder, I would be ready exempt, so I wouldn't have to sit ready at the airport. That would be nice, unless I wanted to be, which I don't. And because I am a line holder, I'm fairly senior, I could easily pick up trips on my guaranteed days off. But I have had some acquaintances do this on the chance that they would not be used. For example, one of my friends, Alan, I think it was Alan, a couple years ago, bid reserve in September because he just knew he would not be used. They used him every single day of the month. Yeah, it would be less likely to happen now because we have a lot of reserves, and September is coming, October is coming. So if I wanted to kind of play gamble, and spin the roulette wheel, I could bid reserve. That would be interesting. There's actually a thought. What about doing that for October? That would be an interesting way to have a vlogtober. I don't think I'm going to do it, but it's a thought. So I've got some more questions here. How long is this video? Oh, it's okay. So someone asked, how do I manage my health and my work-life balance during your first year as a flight attendant? There's no way to do that on a question and answer video. So I might do a separate video on that topic, because that's a pretty broad topic and there's a lot to talk about there. Do I have a trick to remember where I parked my car before a trip? That's actually funny, but it's also a very real question. I think they mentioned something they can't find their car in a parking lot at a supermarket sometimes. Well, I generally remember that I had a great parking spot or a bad parking spot. If I don't remember exactly where I parked and it was a bad parking spot and I remember being disappointed, I kind of know that I had to park way, 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 way away from the airport. And if I remember being happy with that, I usually get a parking spot that's closer to the airport. And if I don't remember where the car is, I just walk around the parking lot like everybody else. Click, click, click. Waiting for a beep. But I usually remember where my car is. Let's see. What do I use to heat up my food on a layover, and where can I buy it? So I used my Hot Logic Mini forever. If you're going to buy a Hot Logic Mini, go to the website, check out their website, especially during a seasonal change. For example, autumn is coming up. August, September, they're going to have a sale on particular colors of Hot Logic Minis. And I think I bought some for $15 each. They're usually about $40 a few years ago for giveaways and to have a backup. But I prefer my Sabbath Heat. I have a very long, tedious video, as most of mine are, comparing a Hot Logic Mini and my Sabbath Heat. So check that video out. If I remember to put a link below, I will. But the Sabbath Heat, which is spelled SABOTHEAT, I buy on Amazon. At one point, Sabbath Heat contacted me and sent me one to use, so maybe to talk about in the video, and I'll tell you, it was life-changing. I much prefer my Sabbath Heat over the Hot Logic Mini. The only selling point Hot Logic has over the Sabbath Heat is that it collapses flatter and it fits a little easier if you have a tiny little lunch bag. So I much prefer my Sabbath Heat. You can buy it on Amazon. I'm going to try and put a link below in the comment section, in the description box, I should say, with a small caveat is it is an infinitesimal, smaller than an eyelash commission from Amazon if you buy anything from me. One of the reasons I don't do Amazon haul videos, because I kind of think it's a little, I hate to say this and I don't want to judge anybody, I kind of feel like it's a tacky little money grab doing haul videos because they all make commissions on those sales, and I don't like to do things like that. It feels less unwholesome to me. But I will put a link below. Remember, I might make a teeny little commission from Amazon if you buy it, but I much prefer it over my Hot Logic Mini. When there's a an unaccompanied minor on the aircraft, is one single flight attendant assigned to that or do we all keep an eye on them? And if someone is assigned to them, is that their only job on the aircraft? No. So the only person who is required to interact with that at one point in particular is when they board the aircraft. The flight attendant will then sign the paperwork, double check all the paperwork is correct, introduce themselves, say hi, little chat with the and then the next person who is responsible for that will be the person who is responsible for that area of the aircraft during the flight. So, for example, on a 319 aircraft, our smallest aircraft, position C, who is usually responsible for the galley, they're also responsible for the last 5 rows of the aircraft. Usually a is positioned in the last row of the aircraft unless they're assigned a particular spot on the aircraft, usually sitting up close to a flight attendant. So they're usually placed in the last row. On a 319, position C would be responsible for that person. On a 320, flight attendant B would be responsible for that seat section. So they're responsible for the in one way. And yes, I think on a 321, position D will be responsible. And when I say responsible, the only real responsibility they have, the only one particular responsibility, is to do a safety briefing and introduce them to the emergency equipment, show them where the exits are, show them where the bathrooms are, when, to let them know when to move, when not to move, because they have to be the last person off the plane with us. So there's a bunch of things that they have to do with that flight attendant, that before we close the door, before we leave. But otherwise, all the flight attendants are just as responsible for the well-being of that So the lead ideally would come back and check on them, see how they're doing. But usually it's the folks that are sitting near the would be more responsible for the moment-to-moment activities. Did that help at all? All right. Oh, there is another issue that I've never experienced. I hope never to experience this. But if we were diverted, say, for example, we were flying to Puerto Rico, but we landed in Miami, and we were not going to leave until the next day, and we have a what happens, right? So that is probably, well, first I'm going to talk with the gate agent, but I know in our manual, we have to actually have that with us. Again, that's never happened before tonight, in my experience. But that would be in, if not the room with us, in a connecting room with the door open or something, I don't know. But we would be responsible for that But that would be, in that case, I don't know, probably the lead would be responsible in that case. But again, I hope to never experience that. I might be wrong in that, but I'll have to check that on my FAM for that. Let's see. There's not a lot left. Where do I get my eyeglasses? So sometimes I get my eyeglasses from an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist. This case right here is from a place called Envision in Boston. That's when I get my prescription glasses that are progressives, because they tend to be very expensive. But the ones I wear frequently, the more dramatic and more unusual. All right, so I'm irritated. How's this for a little mini rant? Two customers just left their table. They left all their plates, all their dishes, all their mess on the table, when right here is where you put your tray full of garbage. They could have just put it right there. So rude. All right, back on point. But my glasses, I judge people harshly. My fun glasses, the ones I wear frequently that change often, I buy from a website called Zeelool, Zeelool.com. It's a Chinese company, I'm sure. And they have fun glasses. It does help to know the proportions you're facing compared to the proportions of the frames and such. So when they say, oh, try them on virtually by just, having the camera on you, but they'll just stretch the frame out to fit your face. I have a huge face, so they're going to stretch the frame I'm looking at to fit me, when in reality it won't fit. I happen to know roughly how large my face is because I've worked in the industry. Or you can look at your eyeglasses that you have already on the inside of the temple. There are going to be some numbers that's going to say 5219. 52 is the number of millimeters across from side to side on each individual lens. 19, that number 19 will be the millimeters across the bridge. So then if you know those numbers, say for a pair of eyeglasses that you already know that you fit in, look at the numbers there and try to keep an eye on the size of the lens on your eyeglass frame. You can also measure millimeters from side to side on the frame itself, because not only is it the lens width, my glasses are filthy, but it's also the width here on the side of the frame in addition to the bridge, the nasal bridge. So that's just one little key point to keep in mind when you're ordering glasses from a website like Zlul. There's a lot of frames I love on the website, but I look at the frame size, the lens size, the bridge, and know that they're ridiculously small and made for little people. So there you go, more information than you wanted. Is there a temperature on the aircraft where we cannot board passengers? Yes. Now on Airbus, I don't know about other airlines, Airbus, we're not allowed to board passengers on a plane, and we have to stop boarding if the temperature is over 85 degrees. In Las Vegas, that means we have to be creative and we have to communicate with our passengers. So when we land, for example, in Las Vegas, during most of the year, but primarily during the summer months, when we land, I ask people to close the window shades except for the exit rows. Very important. Close the window shades, because with the windows open, that aircraft turns into an easy bake oven in no time. But in my airline, for takeoff and landing, we have to have all the window shades open. But for landing, I ask people after we've arrived at the airport, before you get off, close the window shades. That helps keep the aircraft cooler. If we get on board the plane and it's, say, 90 degrees on the aircraft, that's ridiculous anyway. But at 90, we cannot board passengers, or we'd have to stop boarding. If it's below 85, we can board. But I really want to make sure that we have a captain on board, or a pilot on board, or maintenance who can get that aircraft up and running and have the air conditioning going. So that, there is, oddly enough, no low temperature. So if we're in, say, Minneapolis or Chicago and it's minus 14 and we have air stairs and it's only, say, 55 degrees on the aircraft, I think we're still allowed to board, even though it might be that cold. So it pays to wear layers when flying. That was a long answer to that very simple question. Do I have any say on advertisements on my YouTube channel? No. I can kind of say when I want the ads to play, but I usually let YouTube make that decision. So I have no say on what advertisements play during, before or after my videos, and that's fine. I trust YouTube. Should I? Is the lead flight attendant usually the one with the most seniority? No. In my airline, again, I can only speak for my airline and my experience, the most senior person chooses what position they want to fly. So it seems cultural. I'm not quite sure what's going on. But when I first started flying, senior people like to fly lead. They really, really like to fly up in front as lead. These days, senior people tend to like to fly position C in my airline, which is the back galley. I like to fly lead only because I like being on the PA. I like knowing I can set a pleasant tone. I kind of like having a joke or two here and there. I also like being in a position of some responsibility, which is usually, honestly, just usually communicating with the flight deck, honestly. All right, so there's a part two to that question. What are the upsides and downsides of flying lead? The upsides, things I just mentioned. Usually I know I can set a pleasant tone. I like having that responsibility. I like having a little bit of, I wouldn't say power, because it isn't a power, but when you're flying lead, if you want something to happen on the aircraft and it's appropriate, then you can just say it, as opposed to just hope that the lead makes a decision or hopes that they agree with you if you make a suggestion. So I kind of like that. I like knowing the flight deck. I like being up in front. I like knowing I'm flying up in front. I hate flying in the back of the aircraft in the summertime in particular, because it's a lot bumpier in the back. One day I'll do a video on like what's the best seat to sit in on an aircraft, because that's definitely part of it. Downsides. There aren't a lot of downsides outside of, well, you're responsible. If something happens, if there's a serious medical on board, you have some extra responsibilities, usually communicating. The only real downsides I've experienced are when we have like a diversion, for example, or if I have to deplane an aircraft, and you kind of have to be the bad guy, the bearer of bad news. Or if there's a passenger who is being seriously disruptive or seems to be extremely intoxicated, you kind of have to communicate with the gate agents and CROs and things like that. So there are some negatives, but in my experience, that happens so rarely. And if it does happen, yeah, you have to be the bearer of bad news, but what else? What else are you going to do, right? So you do what you have to do and try to be nice about it and deliver your bad news as well as you can. And there you go. When the passengers get off the plane all upset, well, that's okay. They're going to be upset. They're going to be upset no matter what. So let it roll off your back. Do not take the stress on yourself. And the third part, and this is the last question in the video, and probably my favorite question, and I'm so pleased. I wish I'd remembered to write down who asked this. It's the nicest question I've ever seen on my comment section, is when is a good time to thank a flight attendant for their work? And that's so nice, because we work hard. Yeah, I mean, you are just sitting there, and if you're a passenger, you're just sitting there mildly inconvenienced at the fact that you're taking 5 hours out of your day to fly to somewhere, and you know, it's like, oh, you had to pay for this or that, and yeah, there are minor inconveniences, but your flight attendants are working oftentimes on no food, no sleep, under like having worked 14, 15 hours and only being paid for 4 or 5 sometimes, and we're dealing with hundreds, if not 1,000 passengers in the course of a day, and it's a lot of work. It's amazing, but it's a lot of work. Sometimes it's not, and you also have to deal with the boredom. But the fact that one of y'all out there asked, when is the appropriate time to thank a flight attendant? It's so nice of you. So there's a couple ways you can approach that. First off, and one of the nicest, I think, is a little surprise. When you're coming on board, say, for example, talk to the lead flight attendant as you're boarding quickly, because we're doing a lot of stuff during boarding. Say something as simple as, can you please thank your crew for all the work they do? That's perfect. The lead during that flight hopefully has a chance to say that to the other crew and say, oh, this passenger up in 6C was so nice, and he wanted to thank us for our work. That could be it. We had a young lady come on board the other day, and she gave me a couple little Ziploc bags, and inside each little Ziploc bag was a note saying thank you for all you do, and there was a little rubber band bracelet made out of little black and yellow rubber bands. It was so sweet, and so I gave those to my crew. A passenger will come on with candy, a nice way to say thank you, and say, please share this with your crew. Sometimes I do. Kidding, I always do. You don't want this, do you? But give it to the crew. If you don't have an opportunity when they're boarding to say thank you very much during the flight at some point, if you have to go to the bathroom, You see a flight attendant that's not busy or eating, because it would be nice to get a thank you, but while I'm trying to eat, just give me a moment, okay? Get me later. But just stop and say, hey, I just want to say thank you for all you do. I know it's not an easy job, but I want to thank you for your work. That would be amazing. If someone did that to me out of the blue on an aircraft, I'd lose my mind. We do get the occasional rare bird that will come on board and give us like a little Starbucks gift card. You can go to Starbucks and have, 4 or 5. It's always better to have extras. Or if I have a crew of 4 and we have 2 flight crew, hey, if a passenger gave us 6 $5 gift cards, I know it's $30. It's a lot of money. Just hand them to a flight attendant and say, hey, could you give these to your coworkers as a thank you? That would be like something I would do at Christmas or something. Or if I'm going on a big important vacation, But a good time to say thank you to a flight attendant is any time. What's the worst time to say thank you? When we're busy. We're very, very, if you see my face and I'm doing this, thank you is not welcome. I appreciate it, but no. Or if I'm sitting in my jump seat, huddled, trying to eat, push food in my face as fast as I can, don't stop and say thank you. Catch me a moment later. If we have a 5-hour flight, you got plenty of time to do that. But, the only bad time is when we're super busy. Or again, eating, because we have so few opportunities to actually take a moment to ourselves and eat. Where would you say thank you? Again, in the aisles as you're passing by, if you're going to the bathroom and the flight attendants are just pouring a soda, hey, I just want to say thank you for your work. If we're doing service, we're not going to probably pay as much attention, blah, 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 blah. But the fact that you want to say thank you is so amazing, I can't handle it. I can't believe I spent so much time answering that one last question. All right, so I've been talking for 37 minutes, nonstop, unscripted, no surprise. That's my channel. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to have some of my Diet Coke because I'm parched after talking this long. And I'm probably going to walk around IKEA for a little bit and look at things I'm trying not to buy. All right, so thank you for joining me here. If I did not answer a question to your satisfaction, or you'd like me to expand on something, or even have a new question, leave a comment below. Be nice. You're usually nice. And I'll talk to you later. All right, fly safe. Bye.